On the shimmering planet of Luminara, where bioluminescent trees lit up the night like a sea of stars, Princess Silva sat alone in her chambers. Her hands trembled as she carefully shaped a glowing crystal into the form of a bird. It was one of many sculptures she had made over the years, each piece more beautiful than the last. But no one ever saw them. No one cared. Silva wasn't like other Luminarans. From birth, her body carried a condition that caused faint but constant tremors. To her people, who prided themselves on physical perfection and mental harmony, her shaking hands were a flaw too great to overlook. They whispered behind closed doors, calling her broken or unfit. Even her own family avoided discussing her future, except when it came to the looming deadline, her 18th birthday. On that day, if she failed to find a bondmate, she would be exiled from Luminara forever. Bonding was sacred among the Luminarans. It was not just about love. It was about survival. Through bonding, two beings shared their energy and emotions via neural resonance, creating a lifelong connection that strengthened both partners. Without a bondmate, life became unbearable, a slow drain of vitality until death claimed you. And for someone like Silva, whose very existence seemed to repel others, finding a partner felt impossible. The royal courts buzzed with gossip whenever her name came up. Who would want to bond with her? They sneered. Her tremors will disrupt any resonance. Some even suggested sending her away early, sparing the kingdom the embarrassment of an unworthy princess. But there was one person who didn't see her that way, at least not yet. Captain Ilias Venn, a human diplomat stationed on Luminara, stood quietly at the edge of a grand gala hosted by the royal family. His mission was simple: maintain peace between Earth and the alien empire. Yet, as he scanned the room filled with elegant Luminarans dressed in flowing robes adorned with glowing patterns, his gaze landed on someone different. At first glance, Silva appeared ordinary. She wore a plain silver gown, her long hair tied back loosely. Unlike the others, she kept to herself, standing near a window overlooking the glowing gardens below. What caught Elias's attention wasn't her appearance. It was how everyone else treated her. Conversations halted when she passed. Eyes darted away. A wide circle formed around her, as though her presence carried some invisible disease. Curiosity tugged at him. He moved closer, pretending to admire a nearby sculpture while studying her movements. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted a pendant around her neck, but her posture remained regal. There was strength in her silence, resilience in the way she held herself despite the obvious rejection surrounding her. When their eyes met briefly, Elias felt something stir within him, a flicker of recognition, as though he understood her pain without knowing its source. For a moment, she stared back, her expression guarded, before turning away abruptly. Later that evening, Elias found himself lingering near the garden, where Silva had retreated after leaving the gala. Hidden among the glowing plants, he watched her sit on a bench, cradling one of her crystal creations. The light from the sculpture danced across her face, softening the sharp lines of loneliness etched there. "She doesn't belong here," a voice said suddenly, startling him. A young Luminaran noble stood nearby, arms crossed. "That's why no one wants her. She's damaged." Elias frowned, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Damage, or just different? The noble shrugged, uninterested in debating with a human. As he walked away, Elias turned his focus back to Silva. Something about her story resonated with him. Growing up on Earth, he'd faced his share of judgment for being born into poverty, for struggling to rise above circumstances beyond his control. Maybe that's why he couldn't look away. For now, all he could do was observe. But deep down, Elias knew this wasn't the end of their encounter. Somehow, he sensed his path was intertwined with hers, and perhaps together, they could challenge the rigid rules of a society that valued perfection over humanity. Over the next few weeks, Elias made it a point to learn more about Princess Silva. He didn't approach her directly, not yet. Instead, he observed from a distance, piecing together fragments of her life like solving a puzzle. What he discovered intrigued him even more than he'd expected. Every morning, Silva would leave the palace grounds and walk to a secluded workshop nestled at the edge of the glowing forest. There, she spent hours crafting sculptures out of bioluminescent crystals native to Luminara. The crystals were rare and difficult to shape, requiring steady hands and immense patience, qualities many assumed Silva lacked due to her tremors. Yet, her creations told a different story. Each piece shimmered with intricate detail, radiating emotions so vivid they seemed alive. One sculpture depicted two figures reaching for each other under a starry sky, their forms intertwined in longing. Another showed a lone bird soaring above jagged mountains, its wings stretched wide, as if defying gravity itself. Elias couldn't help but admire her work. To him, these sculptures weren't just art. They were windows into her soul. They spoke of resilience, hope, and an unyielding desire to connect despite the barriers around her. But no one else seemed to notice. Her workshop remained empty save for her tools and unfinished projects. Not a single visitor came to see her creations or offer praise. It was as though her talent had been erased along with her worth in the eyes of society. One afternoon, unable to resist any longer, Elias decided to visit the workshop himself. He waited until Silva stepped outside to gather fresh crystals from the nearby forest, then slipped inside unnoticed. The air smelled faintly of minerals and polished stone, and the soft glow of the sculptures illuminated the small space. As he examined each piece, he felt a pang of sadness, not for what was there, but for what was missing. These masterpieces deserved recognition, admiration. Instead, they sat forgotten, hidden away like their creator. When Silva returned, she froze in the doorway, clutching a handful of crystals. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Elias standing among her work. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp but trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," Elias said quickly, raising his hands in apology. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to see your art." "My art?" she scoffed, stepping further into the room. "Why? So you can pity me too?" "No," Elias replied firmly. "Because it's extraordinary." Silva hesitated, caught off guard by his sincerity. Most people avoided looking at her work altogether, dismissing it as irrelevant because of who created it. Hearing someone call it extraordinary felt foreign and dangerous. "You don't know anything about me," she muttered, turning away to place the crystals on a nearby table. "Then tell me," Elias urged gently. "Help me understand." For a moment, she considered ignoring him completely. But something in his tone, a quiet earnestness, made her pause. Slowly, she began explaining how she chose the crystals based on their natural patterns, how she used her tremors to guide the shaping process rather than fight against them. "People think my hands ruin everything I touch," she admitted bitterly. "But these tremors, they're part of who I am. Without them, I wouldn't create the way I do." As she spoke, Elias listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. He didn't focus on her condition or dwell on the challenges she faced. Instead, he celebrated her ingenuity, marveling at how she turned perceived flaws into strengths. By the time their conversation ended, Silva found herself smiling faintly, a rare occurrence these days. Before leaving, Elias turned back to her. "Your work deserves to be seen, Silva. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She watched him go, her heart stirring with conflicting emotions. For the first time in years, someone had looked beyond her tremors and seen the person beneath. And though she wasn't ready to trust him fully, she couldn't deny the spark of hope his words ignited within her. Little did either of them know, this tentative connection would soon grow into something far greater, something that could change not only their lives but the entire world around them. The days leading up to the bonding trials were tense, not just for Silva but for everyone on Luminara. The event was more than a ceremony. It was a cornerstone of their society, a tradition steeped in centuries of history and expectation. For most, it was an opportunity to secure a future filled with harmony and strength. For Silva, however, it felt like a countdown to exile. Elias noticed the change in her demeanor almost immediately. Gone was the quiet confidence she had shown during their conversations in the workshop. In its place was a heavy weight that seemed to press down on her shoulders, making her movements slower, her smiles rarer. He wanted to say something, to offer words of encouragement, but he knew this wasn't his battle to fight. Not yet, anyway. Still, he couldn't stay away. Each evening, after finishing his diplomatic duties, Elias would find excuses to cross paths with Silva. Sometimes, it was as simple as walking through the glowing gardens where she often retreated to think. Other times, he'd linger near the palace archives, knowing she liked to read there when the world became too overwhelming. Though they rarely spoke, his presence was enough to remind her she wasn't entirely alone. On the morning of the trials, the entire kingdom buzzed with anticipation. Elaborate banners hung from every tower, depicting symbols of unity and prosperity. Nobles dressed in their finest robes gathered in the grand arena, eager to witness the sacred rituals unfold. At the center of it all stood Silva, clad in a shimmering gown adorned with crystals she had crafted herself. Her hands trembled visibly as she took her place among the other participants, drawing whispers from the crowd. One by one, candidates stepped forward to test their compatibility with potential bondmates. The process involved neural resonance, a deep mental connection that revealed whether two individuals could share energy and emotions harmoniously. Most pairings lasted only moments before the resonance meter flickered weakly, signaling incompatibility. When it came time for Silva's turn, the atmosphere shifted. Candidates who might have considered her quickly backed away, citing excuses ranging from unsuitable timing to outright disdain. "You'll disrupt my resonance," one nobleman sneered, refusing to even approach her. "She's not worthy of bonding," another muttered loud enough for others to hear. Each rejection stung, but Silva forced herself to remain composed. She had known this would happen. She had prepared herself for it. Still, the weight of isolation pressed harder with every passing moment. Elias watched from the sidelines, his fists clenched in frustration. He hated seeing her endure this humiliation, knowing how much talent and strength she possessed. But what could he do? As a human, he was already an outsider. Entering the trials himself would spark outrage, and possibly jeopardize Earth's fragile alliance with Luminara. Yet, as the final candidate turned Silva down without hesitation, Elias realized he couldn't stand by any longer. If no one else would step forward, then he would. Disguising himself with a hooded cloak to conceal his identity, Elias approached the platform where Silva stood. The crowd murmured in confusion, unsure who this mysterious figure was. Even Silva looked startled, her eyes widening as he stopped before her. "Will you bond with me?" Elias asked softly, his voice carrying both determination and vulnerability. For a moment, Silva stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. Was this some cruel joke? A trick orchestrated by those who wished to humiliate her further? But when their eyes met, she saw only sincerity in his gaze. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. As their hands touched to initiate the resonance test, a hush fell over the arena. The resonance meter, which had remained dim throughout the day, suddenly flared to life. Its light grew brighter and brighter until it surpassed anything ever recorded in Luminaran history. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they witnessed the impossible, the perfect match. Silva's heart raced as warmth flooded her body, steadying her tremors for the first time in years. Through their connection, she felt Elias's unwavering acceptance, not just of her abilities, but of her. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what this meant. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. But their victory was short-lived. As the truth of Elias's identity began to spread, so did the storm of controversy that would soon engulf them both. The revelation of Elias's identity sent shockwaves through the arena. As the hood slipped from his head during their resonance, revealing his unmistakable human features, gasps erupted like thunder. The crowd surged with murmurs, some awestruck, others outraged. A human bonding with a Luminaran. It was unheard of, an act that defied centuries of tradition and cultural norms. For Silva, the moment was surreal. She had spent her entire life believing no one would ever see her as worthy of connection. Now, not only had someone chosen her, but it was Elias, a man who had shown her kindness when the rest of the world turned away. Yet even as joy swelled in her chest, she couldn't ignore the chaos unfolding around them. "Impossible," shouted Lord Valen, a prominent member of the Royal Council. His face flushed with anger as he pointed at Elias. "This is a mockery of our sacred rights. Humans are inferior beings. They cannot resonate with us." Elias stood tall despite the hostility directed at him. He didn't flinch under the weight of accusing stares or harsh words. Instead, he addressed the crowd calmly, his voice steady and clear. "I may be human," he began, "but I felt something none of you were willing to try. Her tremors don't weaken her, they make her unique. And if you'd taken the time to truly know her, you'd understand why she's extraordinary." His words struck a nerve. Some Luminarans shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across their faces. Others remained defiant, unwilling to accept such a radical departure from their traditions. Silva stepped forward, her trembling hands balled into fists. For years, she had hidden behind silence, letting others dictate her worth. But now, standing beside Elias, she found strength she didn't know she possessed. "You call yourselves perfect," she said, her voice rising above the din. "But perfection means nothing without compassion. None of you saw me, not until today. Not until he did." Her declaration silenced the crowd momentarily. Even Queen Miralyn, Silva's mother, looked torn between pride and duty. The queen had always upheld Luminaran customs, often at the expense of her own daughter. But seeing Silva stand so boldly, defending herself and Elias, stirred something deep within her. Before anyone could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "This bond is invalid," cried Lady Kalis, a staunch traditionalist. "It violates every law we hold sacred. We cannot allow this abomination to stand." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, and several nobles moved toward the platform, intent on separating Silva and Elias. But just as they reached for them, a powerful surge of energy pulsed outward from the couple. The resonance meter, still glowing brightly, emitted a wave of light that forced everyone back. "What's happening?" someone shouted, shielding their eyes. "It's the bond," whispered another. "It's stronger than anything we've ever seen." Indeed, the connection between Silva and Elias wasn't just strong, it was unprecedented. Their neural resonance stabilized Silva's tremors, transforming what many viewed as a flaw into a source of power. Together, they radiated a harmony that challenged everything Luminaran society believed about imperfection and compatibility. As the light dimmed, Elias turned to the crowd once more. "You can reject us if you want," he said firmly, "but you can't deny what just happened here. This bond proves that differences aren't barriers, they're bridges. If you refuse to see that, then maybe your idea of perfection isn't as flawless as you think." His words resonated deeply with some members of the audience, particularly those who had long felt marginalized by rigid societal standards. Inspired by Silva's courage and Elias's defiance, a few began to clap hesitantly. Soon, the applause spread, growing louder and more confident. Not everyone joined in, of course. Many remained hostile, vowing to challenge the bond's legitimacy. But for the first time in her life, Silva felt hope. She glanced at Elias, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he replied softly, "because no one else deserved you more." Though the battle was far from over, their bond had already begun to break down walls and pave the way for change. The aftermath of the bonding trials was anything but peaceful. News of Silva and Elias's unprecedented bond spread like wildfire across Luminara, igniting fierce debates that divided the kingdom. Some hailed their union as a symbol of progress, proof that love and connection transcended species and societal norms. Others saw it as an affront to tradition, a dangerous precedent that threatened the very fabric of Luminoran culture. Queen Miralyn called an emergency session of the Royal Council to address the growing unrest. The grand hall buzzed with tension as nobles argued passionately, their voices echoing off the crystalline walls. Lord Valen led the opposition, slamming his fist on the table as he demanded immediate action. This bond is illegal. It violates every law we've upheld for generations. If we allow this to stand, what's next? Will we let humans rule our courts, dictate our ways? Lady Kalis nodded in agreement, her sharp features twisted with disdain. It's not just about breaking laws. It's about preserving our identity. We are Luminarans, pure, perfect, harmonious. Allowing the human into our sacred bonds dilutes everything we are. Silva sat quietly beside her mother, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Though she tried to remain calm, the weight of their words pressed heavily on her chest. She had spent her life enduring rejection, but hearing these accusations in such a public forum stung more than she expected. Elias, however, refused to back down. Standing tall at Silva's side, he addressed the council with unwavering resolve. "You speak of purity and perfection," he began, his voice steady despite the hostility aimed at him. "But I see fear. Fear of change. Fear of something different. What you call dilution is actually growth. Growth that could make your society stronger, not weaker." His words sparked murmurs among the council members, some nodding thoughtfully while others bristled further. Queen Miralyn watched silently, her expression unreadable. As the ruler of Luminara, the final decision rested with her. Yet even she seemed torn between duty to her people and loyalty to her daughter. Finally, after hours of heated debate, Silva rose from her seat. Her voice trembled slightly as she began to speak, but her determination burned brighter than any crystal in a room. "For my entire life, I've been told I'm not enough, that my tremors make me unworthy of love, of belonging. But today, someone looked past all of that and saw me. Not my title, not my flaws, but who I truly am." She paused, meeting her mother's gaze before continuing. "If you invalidate this bond, you're not just rejecting Elias, you're rejecting me. And if being Luminaran means living by rules that cast out those who don't fit, then maybe I don't want to be part of it anymore." A stunned silence fell over the hall. Never before had anyone dared challenge the council so openly. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had stopped. Then, unexpectedly, a soft voice broke the quiet. "Perhaps," Queen Miralyn said slowly, rising from her throne. All eyes turned to her as she stepped forward. "Perhaps we've been wrong." Her admission sent shockwaves through the room. Even Silva stared at her mother in disbelief. The queen took a deep breath, her regal demeanor softening as she continued. "I have always believed in upholding our traditions, no matter the cost. But today, I see how blind I've been. My daughter is not broken. She is strong, talented, and deserving of happiness. And if her bond with Elias proves anything, it's that our definitions of perfection need rethinking." Tears welled in Silva's eyes as she realized her mother was finally standing up for her. Inspired by the queen's words, other marginalized voices within the council began to speak out. A young noblewoman recounted how she had hidden her own struggles with resonance instability out of fear of judgment. An elder admitted regret over ostracizing his nephew for choosing an unconventional path. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in the rigid foundation of Luminaran society. Though resistance remained, especially among staunch traditionalists, the tide was turning. Silva and Elias's bond became a catalyst for change, a reminder that true harmony came not from uniformity, but from embracing diversity. As they left the council chambers together, hand in hand, Silva felt a glimmer of hope she hadn't known was possible. The road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time, she wasn't walking it alone. In the weeks following the council session, Silva and Elias threw themselves into creating something meaningful out of the chaos their bond had sparked. They knew that while some minds were beginning to open, others remained firmly closed. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but they were determined to plant seeds of hope that would grow over time. Their first step was establishing the Harmony Initiative, a program designed to foster understanding and collaboration between different species, abilities, and perspectives. The initiative's headquarters was set up in an abandoned wing of the palace, its walls adorned with Silva's glowing sculptures. Each piece served as both art and symbolism, a reminder that beauty could emerge from imperfection. Elias took charge of outreach efforts, traveling across Luminara to speak with communities who had long felt excluded by mainstream society. He shared stories of his own struggles on Earth, growing up poor and facing prejudice for being different. His vulnerability resonated deeply with many, particularly those who had been marginalized for reasons beyond their control. Physical conditions, unconventional talents, or simply not fitting into societal molds. Silva, meanwhile, focused on inspiring younger generations. She began hosting workshops where children learned to craft bioluminescent crystals, encouraging them to embrace creativity without fear of judgment. At first, attendance was sparse. Parents hesitated to let their kids associate with the disheveled princess. But as word spread about the joy and confidence these workshops brought, more families started participating. One day, during a session with a group of shy adolescents, Silva noticed a boy struggling to shape his crystal. His hands shook uncontrollably, much like hers did, when he grew frustrated and tried to give up. She knelt beside him. "It's okay," she said gently. "Let your hands guide you instead of fighting them. Trust yourself." The boy looked at her skeptically, but followed her advice. Slowly, his trembling fingers began forming delicate patterns in the crystal surface. By the end of the session, he held up a glowing flower, his face lighting up with pride. That moment reminded Silva why this work mattered, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed proof that they belonged. As the Harmony Initiative gained traction, it attracted allies from unexpected places. Scientists intrigued by Silva's tremors began studying how her condition interacted with neural resonance technology. Early findings suggested her unique energy signature might enhance bonding capabilities, offering potential breakthroughs in interspecies connections. This discovery silenced some critics, though others dismissed it as irrelevant. Still, progress came in small victories. A once hostile noblewoman attended one of Silva's exhibitions and left visibly moved, vowing to support inclusivity reforms. A group of young Luminarans formed a coalition called Resonance United, advocating for equal opportunities regardless of ability or background. Even Lady Kalis softened slightly after witnessing the positive impact of the initiative, though she remained wary of humans leading such efforts. Amidst all the change, Elias and Silva found solace in each other. Their bond continued to strengthen, stabilizing her tremors and grounding him during moments of doubt. Late at night, when the palace grew quiet, they would sit together under the stars, discussing their dreams for the future. "I never imagined I'd be doing this," Elias admitted one evening, gazing at the glowing horizon. "When I came to Luminara, I thought my job was just diplomacy. Now, it feels like so much more." "You've given me a voice," Silva replied softly, leaning against him. "And now we're giving others a chance to find theirs too." Their journey wasn't without challenges. Resistance lingered, especially among older generations clinging to outdated ideals. Some even accused them of prioritizing humans over Luminarans, fueling tensions between the two species. Yet every setback only strengthened their resolve. By the end of the year, the Harmony Initiative had transformed from a small project into a beacon of hope for countless individuals. Its message spread beyond Luminara, reaching neighboring planets and sparking conversations about unity and acceptance across the galaxy. Though there was still much work to be done, Silva and Elias knew they had laid the foundation for a brighter future, one built not on perfection, but on compassion, courage, and the belief that everyone deserved a place to shine. And as they stood side by side, watching new alliances form and old prejudices crumble, they realized their bond wasn't just about love. It was about legacy, a promise to leave the universe better than they found it. Years passed, and the ripples of change created by Silva and Elias's bond grew into waves that reshaped not only Luminara, but the entire galaxy. The Harmony Initiative became a symbol of unity, its influence spreading far beyond what either of them had imagined. What started as a small effort to challenge societal norms blossomed into a movement that inspired countless lives across star systems. On a crisp morning under Luminara's twin suns, Silva and Elias stood together at the unveiling of the monument dedicated to their bond. It was a towering sculpture crafted from bioluminescent crystals, designed to resemble two figures reaching toward each other despite an invisible divide between them. At its base, an inscription read, "True harmony comes not from sameness, but from embracing our differences." The ceremony drew attendees from all corners of the galaxy, Luminarans, humans, and representatives from dozens of other species. Among the crowd were former skeptics who had once opposed their union, now standing alongside those they once marginalized. There were also children who had grown up inspired by the couple's story, carrying dreams of a world where everyone belonged. As Silva addressed the gathering, her voice carried both strength and gratitude. "When I was young, I believed my tremors made me unworthy of love or connection," she began, pausing to let her words sink in. "But today, I know that my imperfections are part of what make me whole. And because someone chose to see past those flaws, we've built something greater than ourselves, a future where no one has to feel alone." Elias stepped forward next, his eyes scanning the diverse faces before him. "This isn't just our victory, it's yours," he said, gesturing to the crowd. "Every person here has played a role in shaping this new era. Together, we've proven that fear doesn't have to define us. Compassion can." Applause erupted, echoing through the glowing gardens surrounding the monument. For many, it was more than celebration. It was validation. Validation that their struggles mattered, that their voices were heard, and that change was possible even in the face of overwhelming resistance. After the ceremony, Silva and Elias wandered through the gardens, hand in hand. The air buzzed with laughter and music as people mingled, sharing stories of how the Harmony Initiative had touched their lives. A young girl ran up to Silva, holding out a small crystal bird she had made during one of the workshops. "For you," the girl said shyly, her cheeks flushed with pride. Silva knelt down, accepting the gift with a warm smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." As the girl scampered off, Elias chuckled softly. "You're leaving quite the legacy," he teased. "So are you," Silva replied, nudging him playfully. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, reflecting on how far they'd come. Once outsiders in their respective worlds, they had become pioneers of a brighter future. Their bond had not only challenged societal norms, but had also paved the way for others to follow suit. Cross-species partnerships were no longer taboo. Instead, they were celebrated as symbols of progress. Marginalized communities found courage to speak out, knowing they weren't alone. Yet, amidst all the achievements, Silva often thought back to that fateful day at the bonding trials, the moment Elias had asked her if she would bond with him. It wasn't just a question. It was an act of faith. Faith in her, in their connection, and in the possibility of a better tomorrow. That evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of gold and violet, Silva turned to Elias. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" she asked quietly. He smiled, recalling the memory vividly. "How could I forget? I told you no one else deserved you more." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I never thanked you properly." "You don't need to thank me," Elias said gently. "We did this together." "Yes," Silva agreed, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But still, thank you for asking me." Elias reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for saying yes." Their bond had started with a simple question, but it had grown into so much more. It had sparked revolutions, healed divisions, and rewritten the rules of what it meant to belong. Though challenges remained, they faced them side by side, knowing their love and their shared vision could overcome anything. Under the shimmering stars of Luminara, surrounded by the light of hope they had ignited, Silva and Elias embraced. Their story would be told for generations to come, a testament to the power of acceptance, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to shine. And as long as their legacy endured, the galaxy would continue to move toward a future defined not by perfection, but by harmony.